enough folks here to get started.
And we're live streaming whenever you're ready.
All right. Well, thank you all for joining us for this here Budget Ad Hoc Advisory Committee meeting. And please join me in a moment or two of silence and ask that as we congratulate Chief Walker on his, I'm recommending him to council next week for y'all's approval as our next police chief, but please keep Chief Walker and our police department in your thoughts and prayers. Moment of silence, please. Amen. Thank you very much. So we're going to look at the other departmental requests that didn't have a full-fledged presentation for us. I think Amy's going to combine and kind of run through the highlights of those, and then of course we'll update you on where she is with the process in general. So Amy, can I just go ahead and turn it over to you to share with us what we got?
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. So this might be actually a kind of a brief meeting for us, maybe. There were some departments that we didn't, they were smaller budgets. We didn't really have them present to council. Those are budget, finance, revenue collection, clerk of council, executive, housing and community development, human resources, and livability and tourism. So I just put together, and I sent you all of their detailed requests in the email with the agenda last night, but I'm just going to go over highlights really for each of those. For my department, we asked for, in the general fund, because I have both enterprise and general fund divisions, $211,000 for 2024. And most of that's for 2 new positions that we're asking for our process and service improvement division, including the call center. Safety division is asking for additional funding for protective clothing and equipment. Dock Street is asking for funding to have their rigging equipment inspected. And then we were asking for some overtime for our finance division because the ERP implementation is just requiring a lot of hours of all of my staff. For enterprise fund, anybody have any questions on any of those items? Okay. Enterprise funds, Angel Oak is asking for an additional person, a part-time person to help with monitoring the grounds, and that would help just put another person out there to keep the park clean and also the restrooms clean, which tends to be an issue out there. And then the city market is asking for salary increases for their staff and health insurance for their employees. Any questions on?
Hey, Amy.
Yes.
How many employees does the city market have? I mean, it doesn't seem like a very big ask of 82,000.
Not a lot. Matt or Andrew, do you know the number of employees?
I believe it's 7 or 8 staff.
I was going to say
Okay.
6. I was off a little bit, but yeah. Any other questions?
So this isn't a question, Amy, but I just thought I would put it on everybody's radar screen. You know, the folks at the Low Country Land Trust who own the property all around the Angel Oak have come to us wanting to partner and basically combine the properties into one park and really greatly expand and beautify the park. And it wouldn't be an operating expense, but I do expect them to, at some point when they finalize their budget with what they're improving, to make some request to the city, kind of a capital improvement item when we do that park. And I would expect that request to come in next year. And that might be something we could handle through the Parks and Rec referendum, assuming it passes But I just, since Angel Oak came up there, I just thought I'd put that on everybody's radar screen.
Okay, clerk of council, very thoughtful request that they had an additional 46,000 funding. Most of that is for council member travel. We only budgeted 18,000 for council member travel in 2023. And this would increase it to 48,000, which would give about $4,000 per council member. Before COVID, the budget was $30,200, and we've just never brought it back up to where it was before. Then, as you all know, the expenses for travel have increased as well over time. So that was their largest request. And then they had another request to hold meetings outside of city council because we have to pay for venues when we do that in most cases. And we're anticipating several larger meetings that will require a different venue than city hall. Any questions or thoughts on that?
Clerk, council, all good?
So I have a very brief question. It's ironic this came up because I texted you earlier about this today, Amy.
Yes.
Of the travel budget over the course of time, how much of that budget actually gets spent every year?
All of it.
Does it really?
Mhm. Well, you have to remember too, an $18,000 budget really isn't that much. I mean, we can go back to prior COVID and look to see what that looks like.
I mean,
Yeah.
do we cap each council member at a certain number, or is it just a gross budget and some can spend more and some can spend less?
So Jennifer, Jennifer's on, she can speak to that better probably than me, but it's just been a little screwy with after COVID, but Jennifer, go ahead.
So Councilmember Seekings, prior to COVID, what we were doing is each council member would be capped to a certain amount. And then during COVID, the travel budget was reduced significantly because obviously no one was traveling at that time. So this year we had about $18,000 allotted to council member travel, which worked out to about $1,500 per council member. And you'll be lucky if that gets you to one trip. So ideally, that's the way it should be done. And this would give each council member $4,000 to use for travel and education if they choose. If they don't use it, it's basically use it or lose it. So that's the only reason you can use that money. If it's not used, then it goes back to Amy, basically.
And I get that. And I guess my question was, do we literally cap each council member, or is it just a gross number and some can spend more? For instance, I don't think I've ever spent $1 in 14 years on travel.
Each council member is supposed to be capped, yes.
And sorry,
On a per
because
person basis, basically.
I'm sorry to harp on this because it's a small item, but one of the questions I have is this set, do we have an ordinance that allows for this, or is this just a budgeting item? And if it is, can we use that money for travel or communications? I mean, one of the things that we as council members have no budget at all for anything. We get paid a salary. We then have this travel allowance. We don't have any monies that are allowed back for constituent communications. And if we don't use it for travel, is there some way we can build into the budget the ability to use it? I mean, the most effective way to communicate with our constituents is by mail, and that's expensive. So I don't know if, I mean, I'm never going to use a dime of travel money. It sure would be nice to have a little bit of money to communicate with constituents. So I don't know if that's something that my fellow council members think is important, but I kind of do.
Councilmember Shade wants to be heard.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and Councilman Seekings brings up a very good point. In my first term, I traveled to several of these National League of Cities conferences, and when they were held in Washington, and then I think in the alternate years they were at another site. And I'll tell you that they're very valuable conferences. I picked up a lot of good tidbit information on those trips. But on the flip side of that, maybe if a council member elects not to take the trip, that's sort of in that council member's quote unquote account, and the opportunity to use that for other expenses such as mailing is just not a bad idea. Lots of times I've been trying to, for the past 7+ years, hold my constituent meetings, and that costs money to rent the space to do that. It's not a big deal, but he's right. We don't have a budget, and so if that's a way of working that out, I would certainly like to explore that opportunity as well, to help offset some of these expenses that we personally incur. It's not a big deal, but it does help.
I'm all in favor of that. I think BFRC, I think everyone else would have to work that out, and we might have to make an adjustment to what we call that line item in the budget. But to Councilmember Seeking's point, I don't believe that travel is in the budget. I think there was conversation at council a number of years ago, and I think travel came up, and there was a discussion to cap or give each council member a certain amount, but I don't think it was codified in the code. But I'm certainly open if council members want to use it for administrative functions. I think that's just a question of, would you be able to do that? And that's more of a budget legal question.
Councilmember Waring?
Jennifer, you have a line item for council member supplies as well, right? So, I mean, if
We
we
do.
do some of those items, then we can look at increasing. I don't know if you have that
So
divided out by council member or not, but we can look at that as well.
So we do have a line item for council member admin. And so what we just requested, I think, a $1,000 increase. That's what we've only used that for, is for council member letterhead, business cards. And we typically use that so we requested just a small increase for next year, because I know we have 2 council members who aren't running again. So we're going to have 2 new council members that will need to provide that for, but we do have money in there for that. So, maybe it's just a matter of, if you don't use your travel funds, I mean, we could do a budget transfer to that, but we would just have to keep track of, I guess, to make it even. Amy, I don't know if you have any suggestions for that, or how you would suggest.
I think we just need to look at the overall budget, the line items, and come back with a proposal. How about that?
Okay.
Councilmember Waring?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Before COVID, whenever they had the National League of Cities in Charlotte, I drove, and I didn't valet park my car. I parked my own car, and I think we all ate at a little walk-in diner place. And when I got back, I owed the city $60. I still haven't figured it out. Okay.
Have you paid it?
Oh yeah, I paid it, but
Attaboy.
but I just couldn't figure out, how could you do it cheaper? I mean, I drove, I didn't fly, I didn't valet park my car. I parked my own car, and we didn't eat it in the hotel. We ate, a little diner across the street, and I ended up on I think the per diem per day was something like $25. I don't know many places when you go out of town, you're going to get 2 or 3 meals for $25. So I just think that's, in this case, we got how many lawyers on council? You leave your office, obviously you're incurring costs when you leave your business, and then to get information, hopefully that will prove helpful to the city. And we really do get information. I'll never forget, on Councilmember Shealy's first trip, he came back bubbling with the idea about hiring a grants writer. And we did that. Remember, Mr. Mayor, we funded that, got that funded, and I don't know how many dollars in grants we've gotten as a result of that idea. So these conferences have even if you go to one workshop that makes a difference, and you bring that best practice back to the city, it's cost effective for the taxpayer. So I definitely think that travel budget, and whatever's per diem is per day when you're out of town, is really obsolete and needs to be brought current. So
All right. Well, why don't we think about that on staff and just ask legal a question or two and come
And
back
that's
to
great.
y'all. I hear the spirit of the conversation is that we'd like some flexibility to have a set amount for council member travel to be flexible to be used for other constituent and administrative expense. If that's the spirit, we'll look at that and come back to you.
Sounds
Thank
good.
you.
Yep.
Okay. Executive, so since we're having this conversation, we can bring executive and whatever we're recommending for clerk of council back next week, because there's just a couple of items that we're still evaluating to ensure we have accurate cost estimates. So we'll bring that next week. Housing and community development, they are requesting an additional $203,000 in funding. Largest request was for a new position for administrative coordinator for the Hope Center and for a contract to establish a land trust bank for properties that are acquired but not immediately developed. And then they're also asking for contracted services for a strategic plan for the Hope Center and additional funding for environmental reviews. Any questions on any of that?
All righty.
And then HR requested an additional $39,000. Most of it was for a compensation survey data tool and for additional advertising and promotional funds for job fairs, etc. This one, with our new ERP system, you'll see some shifts in what we're budgeting as well as we're looking at what we need to do next year for the ERP. One of the things we're learning is there's positions that we'll need to help with upgrades and all of those types of things and reports and all of that for both the HR and finance side. So we'll need to add a position to HR for that or IT. We're doing some research and talking with other governmental agencies that have implemented Workday to see how they're doing it. There's two different ways. Either they work directly for HR or finance, or they're part of the IT team. So we're talking to people to see which way we think that will work best for the city of Charleston. So that's just one thing that's outstanding right now for HR. Any questions on that? Okay. Oops. Livability and tourism is requesting an additional $106,000. This is mainly for just one position for a livability review board manager, and that person will act as the administrator of the livability review board that was established by council in March of 2023. So that will help them manage that better.
Just to remind everybody, the main purpose of this board is to address vacant and dilapidated properties in the city. Just as a little reminder. Councilmember Seekings.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. While we're on this, and I don't know if Dan is on this call, but can someone give us an update on how many tourism enforcement officers we have budgeted and how many we have actually on the payroll currently?
Sure.
Yeah.
And I guess the rejoinder to that is my suggestion is going to be we need more. I mean, we have 8 million tourists a year, and I think I may be wrong about this, but the budget we have is for 8. So that's 1 for every million tourists. It just seems to me, and I don't know if there's been a request put in specifically for additional funding to add some more bodies out there on the street, but I would very much be in favor of that if the request was made.
Usually, Dan is very good about asking for what he needs, but we can talk to him about it.
Okay, and I didn't know if this is the right time or place for this. I just saw livability and tourism, so it's just been something that's been on my mind this year.
It's as good a time as any. Absolutely.
Thanks. But anyway, if we can get the answer to that
Yeah.
principal question, which is what we've currently got budgeted and how we're doing and filling those jobs, and then what we can do to give Dan some more help. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Sure. So, but we might also just consider what those tourism officers are doing and what they're monitoring. A lot of times they're monitoring the providers, if you will, like the carriage industry, as opposed to the actual number of passengers on the carriages, if you know what I mean. So,
No, I get it, but the more bodies we have, the sort of freer they are to do a number of different tasks. And if we only have 8, and if you think about how many hours there are in a week, and tourism is a 24/7 event, they're really spread thin and they're not out there all the time. So anyway, I mean, I just think that the more trained people we have out there to help with all the different issues that are associated with tourism, which is our #1 industry with 8 million people, I think it's something we should think about putting resources towards. Anyway,
gotcha. Councilmember.
that's, I think, the purpose of this committee.
There's 7 and they're all filled, Councilmember Seekings.
So that's 1 for every 1.2 million tourists.
That's code enforcement officers, yes. That's
Right,
not all the people that are in tourism that help out with that function. It's just the code
I
enforcement.
get it. I
Yeah.
get it.
But we'll
Okay.
talk again.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Councilmember Shade and then Waring.
Mayor, as I understood you, this was more on the livability side as opposed to the tourism side ledger.
That's right.
That's right.
Yeah, so I just want to echo Councilmember Seeking's remarks about increasing the number of officers, and even though it's not been a specific budget request, I would certainly encourage that.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you. Councilmember Waring.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. When it comes to, like you said, cleaning up these overgrown lots, that falls under, I guess, does that fall under Dan Riccio?
It does, code enforcement normally.
Yeah. And I'm wondering how much of his work is really constituent works on our part, not necessarily tourism, but, you know, helping people clean up yards or take care of graffiti. The one I'm about to mention, there's an area in the district, actually I have it on Public Works tomorrow, where I think the property has come to us, but there's a homeless encampment there. And I reported it to the police a couple of months ago, and I know we try to transition them from whatever wooded area to improve services downtown. But 2 weekends ago, they had a shooting over there, and this is in close proximity to Montclair Drive, which is a neighborhood right behind the Jewish Community Center. I still call it the Jewish Community Center, but Dor Tikva. And it's our property. So I think if we were to go in and bush hog that, does that come out of this budget? So people, I drove over there and I can't drive down there. It's that thick. The growth is that thick. So, and I know I'm not the only one that will potentially have a request like this in the next budget year, but will that come out of this 106,000, or does that come out of, what does that come out of?
That's just their additional funding request. That's not their whole budget. And that was just for that one position. And then they're asking for overtime.
Oh,
But-
okay. Cause
yeah.
see, one of the things we have in West Ashley is we have a burgeoning homeless community, and it is kind of like invisible. We've got more wooded areas, West Ashley, for them to do their encampments that's not highly visible from, you know, the streets and causeways. So, but something like that, and you got a group of apartments on one side, you got this area that we hope to put a park in that's now a homeless encampment, and you got neighborhoods that's literally backing up across the creek from it. So when you start getting gunshot fired in close proximity, we got to do something about that. So whatever budget that we go to on things like that, I'd like to know where it is. And not necessarily today, but we're going to need to enhance that to kind of clean up some situations in West Ashley.
How about we just have Dan come back the next meeting?
No, that'd be great.
Okay.
So, council member, we might have a conversation offline, but we mostly, I report them sometimes myself, to be honest with you. And if there's an encampment on public property, we can give notice, and we normally give a 48-hour notice and request the folks to relocate, offering them services through our Hope Center. And if they don't leave, then we'll ask them to leave. If it's on private property, then that's a different matter, and you got to work through the, private property owner. So it does depend a little bit on where it is, but it should be part of the just operating police department budget to help, and the housing and community development through the Hope Center employees. They kind of work as a team when we have a proposed relocation, if you want to call it that.
Good. Yeah, well, let's talk about it offline. We'll hold a meeting up with that, but yeah, I think this one's on public lands.
Okay. So I had one question, Amy, when it came to the review board, the livability review board, and this may be more like a capital item or a little bit of a revolving fund type of item, but what we had envisioned when we started this review board was that we would have kind of like demolition by neglect, that you would have some funds to where if the property owner doesn't take action, that we could take some action on the property, put a lien on it, and eventually one day we might get some money back, but to have a little working capital, so to speak, for the livability review board to be able to do things like that. Did Dan request any funds for such a thing?
Yes, we have funds for that. We were actually talking about that as well in terms of the best location for those funds and whether we needed to increase them. So that is on our minds. Yes.
Okay. So my guess is that if the board were successful and really making progress, that we would need to increase that allowance a bit.
Right.
Yep. All right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep. So total requests for increases from all the departments was around 20 million the general fund and 824,000 enterprise funds. So we're right on track to where we're usually getting $20 million in requests every single year. And total number of new positions that were requested is 68. That does not include the 15 firefighters we will budget for the Johns Island Fire Station. Those automatically get put into the budget because we obviously need them. So that is the number of positions being requested this year as well. Mostly from the fire department and the parks department were the highest number. Actually,
Right.
they're dead equal in the number of positions they requested each, both at 22.
Hey, Amy, this is
Mhm.
Dudley. Is this in addition to the vacant positions?
Yes, these are new positions.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Any questions on that?
Amy, I know you have those individual department requests and spreadsheets. Could we do by the next meeting just a one-page consolidated by department what the request is increase for each department?
Yes, actually we already have that, Mayor, so I can send that out before the next meeting.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Any other questions? Told you this would be a fast meeting, maybe. So next meeting, we'll start going through all the requests. So in addition, we'll have one comprehensive master list of all the requests that we'll send out. We'll look at fact of life increases, the parking fund lease purchase, start discussing a COLA. Possibly if we have time, start talking about revenues. And our next meeting is next Wednesday, so. And then we can, in addition, we'll have more information from Livability and see if Dan can join us as well. And the clerk of council information as well.
I hope that shouldn't be too burdensome. I don't think it'll take too long.
No, that won't take too long.
It seems to me if we've got a couple of minutes at the next meeting, we should at least start talking about your thoughts on revenues, just so we can get that math in our heads sooner rather than later.
I'm willing, yes, we will.
Okay, thanks.
Mhm.
Would y'all be up for an in-person meeting when we go through all the requests together?
That's fine. That's the way we used to do it before COVID.
That's what I
So
was.
we would have to do it in council chambers and have, so it can be live streamed on YouTube, right, Jennifer?
Mm.
Or at 2 George Street, we could do it there, couldn't we?
So were you thinking of doing this for next week or just a future?
I think they were
Meeting.
talking about our next meeting, yes.
We could try. I need to get with information technology and
Right.
just make sure they're available to do that.
If I can just
Location
weigh
would
in,
be City Hall, right?
if I can
Yes.
weigh in a little bit here, I mean, this committee is great and it's really, we learned so much. It's also a weekly meeting and being able to tune in is really helpful for some of us who also are out there working. So I don't mind meeting in person for 1 or 2, but if we're gonna make it regular, it's just gonna make it tougher to be there.
No,
Yeah.
I wasn't suggesting that. I just had memories. I think it's Councilman Waring just did that. When we got to the point where we were looking through all the different department requests kind of in one big session, we would go through these spreadsheets and have a real open one-to-one conversation. And I thought that was very helpful to me, to be honest with you. But I wouldn't, I don't think we need to do it all the time, but.
Okay. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think at that time, it'd be great to meet in person.
Mr. Mayor, I think that's how we got good at it. It was good.
That's right.
It was like a workshop, really.
It was like a workshop. It really was. Yeah, it felt just that way. Thank you.
So Jennifer and I will see what we can do about that. Right, Jennifer?
Yes, I'm typing an email to Wes right now.
Okay. Okay, was there any questions, anything else you'll want to cover next week that I didn't say we would plan to cover?
Nope,
Okay,
Anybody got anything for us?
nope,
No.
nope.
All right. Well, I think that's it for today. Any other business? Hearing none, we stand adjourned and we'll get together again real soon, I'm sure.